Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's July 6th. Today we celebrate the botanist to Queen Mary II, and we'll also learn about the botanical illustrator and collector who established a worldwide reputation for his incredible herbarium. We'll celebrate a great Himalayan and alpine mountaineer and writer, and he was also a botanist. We also honor bees today with poetry. We grow that garden library with a book about gardening in a humane way, helping you create a garden that is healthy and harmonious for all living things. And then we'll wrap things up with an ode to basil. It's my favorite summer crop. But first, let's catch up on some greetings from gardeners from around the world and today's curated news. Janice P. wrote in from Sioux City to wish her husband a happy birthday. She writes, "Dave puts together all of my raised beds. He moves boulders, and he even pushes the cart when we go plant shopping. He's my partner in crime, and I love how he supports my gardening." Ah, very sweet. Happy birthday, Dave. And then Dana M. wrote to share a picture of her brand new garden shed. And I love that she's standing in front of it, hanging up a sign that says, "Shed, Sweet Shed." Wonderful. I know so many gardeners who are hoping to have a garden shed built yet this summer. They're great. And then finally, Nelia in Delaware sent a picture of her blooming milkweed. It was her first year growing it, and she was surprised to learn that the bloom is sweetly fragrant. And it really is a beautiful blossom. Plus, you get the joy of helping out the beautiful monarch butterfly, which is fantastic. All right, that's it for today's Gardener Greetings. If you would like to participate in the Gardener Greetings segment, just send your garden pics, stories, birthday wishes, and so forth to Jennifer at thedailygardener.org. That's thedailygardener.org. Here's today's curated news. The Guardian's Joanne O'Connor recently wrote a post for their Life and Style section called "The Hidden Gardens of Lockdown." This post came out at the end of June as many of England's best-loved gardens were getting ready to reopen to the public. Out of curiosity, they asked the head gardeners what has been happening behind their closed gates. Gardener Jesse Evans said, "I can't lie, it's been amazing and so peaceful, and it's very easy to stick your head down and just crack on and get things done. But this has given us an opportunity to take stock and look at the garden properly." She also enjoyed the chance to get her hands dirty. She said, "I'm doing more outdoor work than I've done in ages. Usually I'd be in the office at least 2 or 3 days a week, and yet now I've had the perfect excuse not to be." Well, I loved this article, and I loved hearing from the gardeners themselves what they've been doing and how the pandemic has changed their perspective on their jobs as gardeners. This article is a fascinating read, and if you'd like to check it out for yourself and read the entire thing, just search for the word "hidden" in the Facebook group for the show, and this post will pop up. And then Gardenista shared a great post on the hollyhock, Alcea rosea. And the subtitle to this article was "A Complete Cottage Garden." Hollyhocks are the backbone to so many beautiful cottage gardens. In this post, they feature beautiful images of the black hollyhock. So if you're looking for black blooms in your garden, this is a great option. Now, as with many taller blooms, you often need to provide support. This article from Gardenista says, when hollyhocks first appear around midsummer, they hint at late season decadence while still being young enough to be straight and upright. It's after the winds of July that you'll find yourself stepping over them unless they're tied in first. This is another reason to grow them by the shelter of a house or fence. So true. And here's a fun fact about the hollyhock. It's related to the hibiscus, the okra, and the cotton plant. Who knew? If you'd like to check out this post for yourself, it's loaded with great information about the beautiful hollyhock. Just search for the word hollyhock in the Facebook group for the show, and you'll be able to read this post in detail for yourself. Then finally, for today, I wrote a post called What's Green and Sings. Such an intriguing title, isn't it? Well, the title is the opening question to a joke that I recently heard, and I'll tell you the answer at the end of the post. This post is about parsley, or Petroselinum crispum, which sounds like a spell from Harry Potter. Petroselinum crispum, parsley. Now, I have to ask, are you growing parsley? I am. But generally, I only grow the flat leaf variety since the curly leaf parsley is mainly used as a garnish, and I never have much time for that when I'm cooking for teenagers. I usually have a line at the stove for every meal, so there's not much garnishing going on at my house. Parsley is a member of the Umbelliferae family, which includes celery, carrots, dill, cilantro, caraway cumin, and also poisonous hemlock. It also includes other essential herbs like angelica, fennel, lovage, and parsnip, just to name a few. The Umbelliferae are aromatic flowering plants, and they're favorites among the ladybugs and the parasitic wasps. And oh man, if you've ever grown angelica, one of my favorite herbs, you will see parasitic wasps like crazy. Just insane. My husband used to sit out on the porch and take phone calls last summer. And one time he came in and he's like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe the wasps that are on this plant. And I knew right away what he was talking about. And you will too if you ever grow angelica. Now, it's easy to see how the family Umbelliferae got its name. It's named that because of the tiny little flowers that get clustered together that form an umbel, or a little flower overhang that looks a little bit like an umbrella. Just think of a dill in flower, and you'll immediately know what I'm talking about. In terms of flavor, parsley can be a little controversial. You either love it or you hate it. Parsley definitely has its detractors. Ogden Nash famously wrote, "Parsley is garsely." And Margaret Fishbeck cursed, "Parsley, parsley everywhere. Beep, I want my victuals bare." If you want to read the actual quote, you'll have to do it in the blog post over at thedailygardener.org. And the Minneapolis journalist Bradley L. Morrison wrote an uncomplimentary ballad to parsley. I found it in a 1963 newspaper. He wrote, "A sprig of parsley on my butter brings thoughts that I had best not utter. It's far more than I can endure when it floats on my soup du jour. I shun the hostess who would shred the silly stuff on buttered bread. And I always have a yen to bop the chef who parsleys my lamb chop. Parsley is a dreadful habit, which I would love were I a rabbit. But since I am a man, alas, I'd just as soon eat sautéed grass. These lines are to the parsley plant, which I try hard to like, but can't. Very clever. Yet the history of parsley isn't all bad. The ancient Greeks wore crowns of parsley to honor their dead. And Greek gardens were bordered with both parsley and rue. Thus the saying, "We are at the parsley and rue." It's just another way of saying we are just getting started. And I loved this 1901 article that I found in the St. Louis Republic. It advised parsley should always accompany onions as it counteracts the strong odor and sweetens the breath. For this reason, it is one of the main ingredients in potato salad. Bear this fact in mind when using onion for a flavoring. So parsley acts as an onion neutralizer. I can almost see myself standing in front of the stove now as I'm cooking onions, dropping in a little bit of parsley, saying, "Petrosalinum crispum, take that, onions." And in August of 1851, the Cincinnati Enquirer posted this favorable ode to parsley. It said, "Without parsley, some of the world's finest dishes would lack the savor which makes them stand head and shoulder above their unparsleyed cousins. Imagine new potatoes and butter alone, lacking a dash of shredded greenery. Imagine hash-browned spuds robbed of this most decorative, most flavorsome touch. And what plate of lamb chops would be complete without its crispum? And what home garden would be as beautiful if it lacked a cheery parsley border? And when the winter winds blow cold outside the kitchen window, doesn't a pot of fresh, verdant parsley add beauty as well as savor to the household? No dinner piece de resistance can be truly imposing, missing its fluffy green decoration. Without it, a whole list of soups would be little more than hot." Now, if you've never grown parsley, I hope you'll give it a try. Maybe start with the curled and use it as a garnish, or go straight to the flat leaf and use it with potatoes or soups. Before I close, I thought I'd ask if you'd ever tried growing the herb chervil. Chervil is sometimes called gourmet parsley, but it tastes similar to tarragon. Chervil has a beautiful, delicate-looking fern-like leaf. I love it. And it turns red in the fall, which is another plus for growing chervil. In fact, August is a wonderful time to sow chervil, so keep that in mind when you're planning your fall garden. And here's a fun chervil fact. The 1884 Dictionary of English Names of Plants lists chervil as the shepherd's clock because the blossoms open at 5 in the morning and then close up around 8 in the evening. Finally, the word chervil is derived from a Greek word meaning the herb of rejoicing or the cheer leaf. I love that. The cheer leaf, chervil. Oh, and I almost forgot to share the answer to the joke at the top of this post. What's green and sings? Elvis Parsley. Ba-dum-bum. All right, that's it for today's gardening news. Now, if you'd like to check out my curated news articles and blog posts for yourself, you're in luck because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group for the show. It's called the Daily Gardener Community. So there's no need to take notes or search for links. The next time you're on Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community and request to join. I'd love to meet you in the group. And I want to take a quick second to welcome our new members, Tara Weatherholt, Linda Cronin, Bronwyn Nicholas, D.L. Sal, Laura Stowe, Wanda Bryant Hunter, Desiree Bell, Alexis Rickenbacker Suttle, and Laura Wilson. Welcome, you guys. Here's today's brevities. Today is the anniversary of the death of Leonard Plukenet, who served as the botanist to Queen Mary II and who died on this day in 1706. When he died, like almost every plant lover of his era, he left his collections and herbarium to Sir Hans Sloane, which is how the Plukenet collections have become one of the oldest still existing at the Natural History Museum in England. As the royal botanist, Plukenet was an important part of botanical society during the 1600s. Along with George London and William Sherard, Plukenet assisted the zealous botanical aspirations of Mary Somerset, the Duchess of Beaufort. Her next-door neighbor was Sir Hans Sloane, and when she died, she too left her herbarium and other valuable botanical items to Sloane. This is how Hans Sloane became a one-man botanical repository, and that repository ultimately became the National History Museum. Plukenet played an unforgettable role in naming the sacred lotus. And in 2011, Corinne Hanna wrote an exceptional piece about Plukenet's name for the sacred lotus. Here's an excerpt from Corinne's marvelous article, which appeared in the Calgary Herald. The English botanist Leonard Plukenet christened the sacred lotus in 1696 as Nymphaea Indii Plotibus Gardens Foliae Umbilicatus Ampullus Pediculus Spinosus Flora Rosa Purpureo, or the marsh-loving, nut-bearing Indian water lily with large navel-centered leaves, prickly stalks, and rose-purple flowers. I'm not going to tell you how many takes it took me to say that. Oh my goodness. Anyway, thank heavens for Carl Linnaeus and his invention of binomial nomenclature, which decreed that each plant could only be identified with two names. But Linnaeus was not infallible. He too identified the sacred lotus as being closely related to the water lily family, Nymphaea. But recent genetic testing has confirmed that the sacred lotus belongs to a genus unto itself, Nelumbo nucifera. This aquatic plant is not even remotely related to water lilies. In fact, it's far more closely allied to woody plants like plane trees or banksias. And today is the birthday of the great Sir William Jackson Hooker, who was born on this day in 1785. Hooker was both a botanist and a botanical illustrator, and he was a great friend of Joseph Banks. Thanks to his inheritance, Hooker was wealthy. He didn't need a patron to fund his work or his expeditions. Hooker's first expedition was to Iceland in the summer of 1809. The trip was actually Banks's idea. Hooker came along in order to collect specimens as well as to trial everything he discovered. Unfortunately, during their voyage home from Iceland, there was a terrible fire. Most people don't realize it, but Hooker nearly died. Sadly, all of Hooker's work was destroyed, but it turns out Hooker's mind was a steel trap. In a remarkable accomplishment, Hooker was able to reconstruct his discoveries and published an account of his adventure in a book called Tour in Iceland. Over his lifetime, Hooker established a global reputation for his world-class herbarium. By 1841, he was appointed the director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. Hooker elevated Kew to greatness. His leadership resulted in an expanding of the gardens from 10 to 75 acres, as well as adding a 270-acre arboretum and a museum for botany. In 1865, there was a virus going around at Kew. Everyone had sore throats. Soon Hooker, too, became ill. He was 80 years old. The virus overpowered him, and he died. His son, Sir Joseph Dalton Hooker, an outstanding botanist in his own right, succeeded him at Kew. And today is the birthday of the great Himalayan and alpine mountain climber and mountaineering writer Frank Smythe, who was born on this day in 1900. Frank had a diverse range of interests, which he mastered, including photography, collecting plants, botany, and gardening. He is most remembered for his mountaineering and for discovering and naming the Valley of Flowers in the western Himalayas in India. During his lifetime, Frank would go on 7 expeditions to the Himalayas, where he especially enjoyed botanizing and taking pictures. In 1931, Frank stumbled on the Valley of Flowers along with 2 other English mountaineers after they got lost. The climbers had just finished ascending Mount Comet, and they were looking for a place to escape bad oncoming weather. They found the Valley of Flowers, and it enchanted them, and the flowers made it feel like they were in a real-life fairyland. When Smythe returned to England, he wrote a book called Comet Conquered, and in it he christened the area the Valley of Flowers. Well, the name caused a sensation. And in one of his later books, Frank wrote about the magical moment he discovered the valley. Within a few minutes, we were out of the wind and in the rain, which became gradually warmer as we lost height. Dense mist shrouded the mountainside, and we paused, uncertain as to the route, when I heard Holdsworth, who was a botanist as well as a climbing member of the expedition, exclaim, "Look!" At first I could see nothing but rocks. Then suddenly my wandering gaze was arrested by a little splash of blue, and beyond it were other splashes of blue, a blue so intense it seemed to light the hillside. Holdsworth wrote, "All of a sudden I realized that I was simply surrounded by primulas. At once the day seemed to brighten perceptibly. Forgotten were all the pains and cold and lost porters. And what a primula it was! All over the little shelves and terraces it grew, often with its roots in running water. At the most, it stood 6 inches high, but its flowers were enormous for its stature and ample in number, sometimes as many as 30 to the beautifully proportioned umbel, and in the color of the most heavenly French blue and sweetly scented. In all my mountain wanderings, I had not seen a more beautiful flower than this primula. The fine raindrops clung to its soft petals like galaxies of seed pearls and frosted its leaves with silver." Well, now you can see how Frank's writing inspired many to make a pilgrimage to the valley. Today, for people who make the trek, the Valley of Flowers is a 7-day trip from Delhi. It's now a protected national park. And as the name implies, it's a lush area famous for the millions of alpine flowers that cover the hills and slopes and nestle along icy flowing streams. Through most of the year, the Valley of Flowers remains hidden, buried under several feet of snow throughout a 7 to 8 month long winter. In March, the melting snow and monsoons activate a new growing season, and there's a brief 3 to 4 month window when the Valley of Flowers is accessible, generally during the months of July, August, and September. In 1937, Frank Smythe returned to the valley, where he especially enjoyed botanizing. He gathered specimens and seeds, and he documented his discoveries. The Valley of Flowers is home to over 500 varieties of wildflowers, and many are still considered rare. Along with daisies and poppies and marigolds, there are primulas and orchids growing wild. The rare blue poppy, commonly known as the Himalayan queen, is the most coveted plant in the valley. In Unearthed Words, today's poetry is all about the buzz of July, bees. This first one's a quote from the garden writer Elizabeth Lawrence. "The hum of bees is the voice of the garden." The American Romantic poet James Russell Lowell wrote, "The dandelions and buttercups gild all the lawn. The drowsy bee stumbles among the clover tops, and the summer sweetens all to me." Then John Bannister Tabb, the American poet and priest, wrote a little poem called "The Violet and the Bee." "And pray, who are you?" said the violet blue to the bee with surprise at his wonderful size in her eyeglass of dew. "I, madam," quoth he, "am a publican bee, collecting the tax of honey and wax. Have you nothing for me?" And here's a little poem from Emily Dickinson, the American poet. "Answer, July, where is the bee? Where is the blush? Where is the hay?" "Ah," said July, "where is the seed? Where is the bud? Where is the May? Answer thee, me." And finally, here's a sweet little poem from the American poet David Wagoner called "Falling Asleep in the Garden." All day the bees have come to the garden. They hover, swivel in arcs, and whirling light on stamens heavy with pollen, probe and revel inside the yellow and red starbursts of dahlias, or cling to lobelia's blue-white mouths, or climb the speckled trumpets of foxgloves. My restless eyes follow their restlessness as they plunge bodily headfirst into treasure, gold-fevered among these horns of plenty. They circle me, a flowerless patch with nothing to offer in the way of sweetness or light against the first omens of evening. Some even now are dying at the end of their few weeks, some being born in the dark, some simply waiting for life. But some are dancing deep in their hives, telling the hungry the sun will be that way, the garden this far. This is the way to the garden. They hum at my ear. And I wake up startled, seeing the early stars beginning to bud in constellations. The bees have gathered somewhere, like petals closing for the coming of the cold. The silhouette of a sphinx moth swerves to drink at a flower head. The night-blooming moon opens its pale corolla. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Humane Gardener by Nancy Lawson. This book came out in 2017, and the subtitle is Nurturing a Backyard Habitat for Wildlife: How to Create a Sustainable and Ethical Garden that Promotes Native Wildlife, Plants, and Biodiversity. In Nancy's words, a humane gardener challenges herself to see the world through the eyes and ears and noses and antennae of other species, from the easy-to-love butterflies and birds to the more misunderstood moles and beetles and wasps and groundhogs. She appreciates all the creatures just trying to make a life outside her door, rather than applying compassion selectively to some species and not others. This book is 224 pages of valuable, inspirational, and critical information designed to help you create a garden that is healthy and harmonious for all living things. You can get a copy of The Humane Gardener by Nancy Lawson and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $16. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 2015, Leah Raup over at theunboredhousewife.com wrote an ode to basil. It's a delight. Basil, sweet basil, you are a true summer treat. Straight from the plant is the only way to eat your tender green leaves on caprese salad or penne. The uses for you are vast. They are many. In ice cream or cookies, you're an unexpected flavor. You make me creative and cause me to savor the warm summer air and my bare feet in the grass. I'm pondering ways to store you when autumn comes to pass. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.